All right, good morning, buddy. Good to have you here.
Yeah, good morning to you too. It's June 27th, the year. It's 2023. Welcome aboard, everybody. You listen to the Crushing Iron Podcast, episode 696.
Yeah, it is 696, and it's
inching our way to
perfect day.
Inching our way to 700. What is that in and around? I mean, I'm not a baseball guy, obviously, but wasn't like the 700 and change like the big like summer of baseball with Sosa and McGuire? They were chasing 70. That's right. They were chasing 70. They were chasing 70.
Eventually 700. Yeah. Bonds got over it.
That's what I thought. Yeah, I thought there was a couple like sevens in there for what they were chasing. But yeah, it's we're inching our way closer to 700. But yeah, it's episode 696. Hope you're all having a wonderful week and an awesome end to the month of June as we get closer to the end of the what'd you say?
Sorry, I just had a thought. I think you're thinking of the 700 Club.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, 700 Club. Yeah. Like I said, that's
good morning.
Baseball's not really
fireplace.
Not really my wheelhouse. The old 700 Club. But anyway, it's your first time tuning in today. Welcome. We appreciate your time. We know you have quite a lot of options in the Triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general. Time is very valuable, so we appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We do race recaps and also a lot of race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life, not just as human beings, but also as coaches and athletes ourselves. We also talk frequently about what our own athletes are going through. Mike and I work with a very wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner level and first-time athletes looking at the very first 5K or sprint triathlon, all the way up through elite-level amateurs trying to get back to World Championships and everyone in between from all over the globe. And we use the feedback loop we have with them and training peaks, emails, text messages, and the like to drive the discussion today. We often also utilize our Facebook group like we will today. You can search that, Crushing Iron Group. Awesome people, fantastic community, solid resource in a sport that's oftentimes very overcomplicated and confusing. It is a solid space to get great information. And if you can't get it from the group and the power of the people, you can post a question like we had the contributors do a few weeks ago. And we'll get to those in order as best we can today when members of the forum go in and drop questions and we answer them live on the podcast. So be part of that community. Don't be a lurker, but be an active participant and help to grow the sport of triathlon and give some answers out, especially for those wild and sage veterans we have in the group. But that's it. We don't do sponsors. We don't do ads, but we do have one agenda, and that's to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
Yeah, that's a good one. Wiley Veterans. Yeah, we have a lot of them in there.
And
this sport must be confusing because there was a lot of questions posted, and let me just save you some time. Just work harder.
Right. Yes, that's right. Work harder. Done. No, on the podcast 690. No, it was like, I feel we do a Q&A about once a month in there, and we always get, some questions are obviously going to be repeated, from different people, but, worded in a different way. But we did ask for a little help because, and that was probably the big thing. We asked for some help, which, people don't really do anymore these days, act like they know it all. But we got a lot of stuff going on the next few weeks. So we thought, you know what, pop in, ask us some questions. We'll get to them. We've done that. A lot of the questions, because I'll probably skip over those today, but we had a lot of questions on fueling, race nutrition, hydration, stuff for just training, also just kind of day-to-day stuff, but also especially in racing. And we'll hold off on that just because, Mike and I are knowledgeable enough, but we are not experts. And, while we can give you our best experiences, we aren't professionals in that area. And I think trying to be sensitive to the mild wielding power that we have with our microphones to suggest to do things. We'll probably try and have on a guest here in the next month or so to talk about that. We had Dr. Alex Harrison, who is a hydration fueling expert, in my opinion. I'm a huge fan of his. We had him on our team Zoom call a few weeks ago and got insane feedback, just all positive. He's not only very smart, but he's a great guy doing great things. He has an app called the Saturday app, but it's a custom fueling app that you can do yourself. So I won't go any more into that, but again, we don't do sponsors, but we do like to toss in people that we like and we think you would benefit from. So we'll have him on the show maybe in the next 3 or 4 weeks if we can get him on. So we'll skip those questions. but we'll get to the rest of them as best we can, and as many as we can. And first one, the man, the myth, the legend, Glenn Robecki. Glenn. How about a question on how to train for a running only event, i.e. half or full marathon? How long out should we start? Same as you do for triathlon, or run more often and longer, faster or slower, or just bike a lot. So there's about 17 questions in there. Yeah. I'll try and do my best to loop them into and condense them into one. And we've talked about this before, but this time, especially early season, right? Fall or winter, early spring, and then late fall going into winter, you have a lot of athletes that will target, 10Ks, half marathons, full marathons. From my experience as a coach, we've got, we have quite a few 5-6 athletes go to Boston every year. We got athletes that race half marathons. It's my favorite distance to tell people to train for, just because it's speed. And if you can run a fast half, you can run a pretty solid 18 and 20 miler. So that's the best way to train the best distance, I think, for most athletes to kind of target 10K half. But if you're training for distances like the half or the full, when you start to add in longer runs is obviously very dependent on the type of ability you have, and then the time it's going to take you to cover the course, but then also the training you've done right before that. I think I've said this on multiple podcasts, but we've had, I think, 4 or 5 athletes that did us late season 70.3 and then did like a 4 to 6 week heavy run block, and then use that to qualify for Boston in the marathon. Because they're fast, they become pretty durable. You got to put in a lot of volume, so you're creating a lot of aerobic capacity. You're also obviously, running at speed as well, because 70.3 to me is a speed distance. That's why I think it's kind of the hardest one to nail, because you can kind of go on a rivet the entire time. But if you're trying to handle both, really it's just about how do you manage stress, right? I think a lot of athletes, confuse when they ask this question a lot. They'll say, hey, I can't bike today for an hour, so can I just run for an hour? No, that's not the same stress, right? You go from a non-impact, non-technique driven, sport or discipline like cycling, where it's very easy hour, you can easy hour spin and get, create very low stress. And you're probably gonna have to do it inside. So again, not that much stress, probably get a fan going, water bottle next to you, or run outside for an hour, especially, in this time of year. Pounding ligaments, technique, humidity, dew point, probably dehydration if you don't fuel properly. That's a lot more stress. So you have to, again, kind of look at the total volume and stress you can handle, right, in your peak phases for the disciplines you do already. If you're doing triathlon, and then remove some, and then add a little bit more running or just a bit more intensity. But one of the biggest things I find with athletes that we either start working with, or we get questions, or I see kind of posting on Facebook and different forums, is just how much so many athletes overrun distance-wise when they're unprepared for it, and just practice doing distance slowly. They go from 2 to 2.5 to 3 hour, even like longer than 3 hour runs. I don't know any coach that would tell you that's a good idea to run anywhere over 2.5 hours for really any distance up to a marathon. Ever. It's not, you're not, a lot of coaches would tell you not to run over an hour and 30, hour and 45, because the amount of recovery it's going to take, the amount of strain, you're not working on anything. You're just working on being the same pace or slower for longer, and then under increased load, increased fatigue in your tendons, ligaments, and kind of skeletal structure, therefore practicing bad form. So you really, honestly, I think you become a slower, worse runner by doing that. So instead of maybe doing, a 2.5 hour run, do an hour and 45 minute to 2 hour run where you run easy. We're huge fans of the negative split run. Like, say you have a 2 hour run, maybe do the first 75 minutes easy and then finish fast, right? So you're practicing two things, right? Running with good form, right? On tired legs, creating speed at the end, but also what you're not doing is like coming out of the gate so hard and then engaging the wrong type of system and then bonking towards the end. So, that's probably a whole podcast we could do. I think we've got quite a few on it. But again, focus on speed and durability, and you're pretty much every time, you're better off coming to the race crisp, fresh, and fast versus overtrained, slow, and broken down. And that, unfortunately, is how most athletes show up to the start line of not just an Ironman or 7.3, but I would say it's more than it should show up to a full marathon totally overtrained with no speed and no crispness, if they even make it there. Because that is the distance where you see more athletes not make it to the finish, not make it to the start line because they're hurt. They overran. They run a one. They want to run 740s, so they try to run 740s in practice and just totally destroy their body. Remember, your hopes, your dreams, your expectations are from the chin up. Your body knows nothing, and so when you kind of go against what it's prepared for, it's going to revolt. You can't betray your body with your mind. And a lot of athletes do that on a day-to-day basis or weekly basis by running too long or running too hard too often for too long, and then never giving your body enough time to soak things in, to adapt. And again, the goal is to be faster. The goal isn't to break down and be slower over time.
I mean, the marathon, if that's what we're talking about, is just such a different beast. And I remember when, several years ago, we were talking about, and because we saw a lot of training plans, and I was talking to you about, hey, should we put a marathon plan in there? And you're like, nope, because I don't want, it's one of those things you got to kind of keep an eye on. And over time, I've really learned, because it also depends on what the goal is, I think, of the marathon, because you mentioned BQ people, and some people just want to run a marathon, right? So in my opinion, like training triathlon and keeping cycling in there, and that even, like long walks or just the lower impact stuff just to build up, because I think people underestimate sometimes all the running volume a lot of these marathon plans have in them. And I don't know if they're ready for it. And, when I started, all I did was running. That was like, I did a 5K and a 10K. Then I went up to a half marathon, and I just felt like shit all the time personally. And then we got into triathlon, and I started working with you later that year. And the next year I basically was right in the middle. I think, remember when you did that marathon, and it was just kind of on a whim that one year. And I think it was that rainy year or whatever. Anyway, it was like a year after I did my first half marathon, and I was right in the middle of either 70.3 or Ironman training. And I'd knocked off like 25 minutes, and I wasn't even trying to train for a running thing, So like, it depends on, for me, like what their goals are. And a lot of people, like personally, I think cycling and swimming are really good for running, So I like to keep that going, especially if they want to keep being a triathlete. It's like, why, just shit can the whole 9 yards and focus 100% on running, unless you're really committed to BQ or something like that. But I don't know. It's a lot of pounding. And if you're trying to, like you're talking about, like sometimes these plans will up your volume and throw you way over the edge, and yeah, maybe you can do it, but the next thing you know, you're going to be brittle, and who knows how that affects you in the long term too. I just, I don't know. I have no interest in a marathon.
Yeah, no, it's like the only reason you do one is at the end of a full distance race. No, I mean, you even see, like, now you see a lot of long distance, even marathon, like professional runners getting bikes and cycling, because it allows them time to, again, to bridge that gap between always having the pounding on your feet. I mean, if you had to choose, like, worst case scenario, if you feel like you're too, brittle, or, you're too injury prone, then, ride twice a week and make that your only intensity.
Yeah.
A week, and then run easy 5 or 6 days a week. I swear to God, you'll be in better shape. You'll be a better runner. Right? You can't do it the other way. You can't have a really, because we all talk about, it's like you're building the cake, the foundation, which is the strength in the chassis, and again, the aerobic, the skeletal, foundation to withstand and hold and be durable, to hold the speed you've created. Most athletes, again, try to, like we said, put the engine of a dump truck inside of a RAV4 or a Miata, and then they wonder why they break down and it rips everything apart. Like, you have to know what you're training for. And that's why, I mean, we coach, we do a free podcast, but we're also, a business, and we've lost money on, or not lost, but we've chosen not to make money off creating marathon training plans, because I think they're too dangerous. I think there's too much risk to be injury prone. Running is just one of those things where you have to be You just have to be paying attention, honestly. And I'd rather, work with an athlete and, or fewer athletes to make sure they do it the right way and healthy versus put out a block where people are getting hurt and overrunning and, not really getting any better. So again, those are tricky, but it can be done. Gabe Raff. I just signed up for my first 70.3 Santa Cruz, first one in 7 years, did a 7-week base building phase and was feeling strong. Literally days after I signed up, I got ankle tendonitis flare. Do you stop running? Ease up? I know it depends. I really like the training and love that I'm back running. This is a great question. It might be, if I don't have a high ankle, just perineal tendonitis that you've got going on down there. First things first, you get an answer. I mean, a lot of athletes, and I kind of like I push them all the time on this, is like, stop wondering what it is. And
right.
if it's lingering, then you're just choosing to stay hurt. Find a way to resolve it. Don't just stay hurt and guess and wonder. Figure it out. So go see a good physio. I'm kind of always wary of, the first things first, people always go to the doctor. I'm like, find like a physio or PT who can tell you like what you might need to strengthen or lay off. It could be anything. It could be your shoes. It could be an insert. It could be, your cleats on your cycling shoes. It could be a ton of things. You can't go wrong with at least taking, a week, 4 to 5 days off running and just increasing your cycling and swimming. And then trying to get an answer. But the last thing you want to do again is, we just talked about in the previous question about practicing, running slower and with worse form. With these athletes, you see that way overrun and just crush their body. People do the same thing with these niggles and flare ups, right? They choose to stay hurt and injured by just starting to run a week or two before they really should, and then they do it again, and they do it again, and they do it again. The next thing you know, they haven't been able to run all because they never chose to get healthy. So that's my 2 cents. I always kind of like shut athletes down if I think it's real serious, or it could linger. 1, get an answer. B, treat it. C, get better. That's it. I mean, that's how you approach things like that. So if it's really preventing you from running, it's getting worse, then yeah, find an answer and then stick with it. And then don't come back too early, and don't let your ego and your expectations and again, go back to the first question. Don't let your mind betray your body. If your body, because that's what happened. Your body was telling you right behind this flare up that something was too much. So I think that's something that you really have to be focused on and just be very specific about. But again, that's why triathlon's a great sport. You got swimming and you got cycling to lean back on.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I totally empathize with this situation because, man, there's really nothing worse than really wanting to train and then all of a sudden you got something you're dealing with like that. So I totally agree with you. That's kind of goes back to that last question about, just get on the bike. And, like, I think people really fret the fitness loss, and then that starts getting in your head or whatever like that. But it's just crazy to me how, I mean, you might think you're losing fitness really quickly, but you're not, if you've been training a while and stuff like that. So definitely get to the bottom of it, and find out if there's nothing wrong, and then get solutions as far as balancing things out or figuring out what's going on. Because because it's the fear of the unknown, I think sometimes, and I think that compounds your stress levels. So kind of get to the bottom of it, make sure nothing's really, like, seriously wrong, and then just, look for answers. I mean, I'm a big guy as far as figuring things out. I'll look around and just try different things and get to the bottom of it. But usually, yeah, it needs some rest, or you need to kind of lay off what you have been doing, whatever that is, and just kind of rebuild. But don't stress it out too hard. Just kind of, hopefully nothing's like seriously wrong, but you can follow multiple. I mean, even again, going back to the last question, like talking about that one open marathon that I did, I was coming off of really bad Achilles tendonitis. Like my long run was like 13 or 14 miles.
And I did it like a week before because I was having a real problem running. I was getting dry needled like twice a week. I was just not in anywhere close to run shape. And so I went out and ran the first half marathon part of it super chill, and then ran a 1:34 or 5 on the back half in Nashville, like on a very hilly course. We've had a ton of athletes come up. And Tim O'Donnell, we talked about him before, second in KONA, coming off a foot injury where he just biked a lot. Like especially if you've been doing this for a while, it sounds like, you're maybe a little bit different because you haven't raced maybe 7 years. So that's a little bit different, but yeah, don't sweat it. Again, play the long game, get healthy, and then come back for more when you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
Amy Taylor, I want to know your thoughts on the slot allocation process, how the women for tri-slots only go to certain races and are not spread evenly amongst all races. For example, last year at one full Ironman race, the women 40 to 45 had 2 world championship slots. Another one, same age group at 16. Also, how slots are rolling so far for both 70.3 worlds and full distance worlds in Nice. I read recently that some slots at Nice essentially went unclaimed. I've covered this before, but I'll say it again. And if it ruffles your feathers, I'm sorry, but it's the God's honest truth. Ironman is not doing anything to increase participation with women in sport. Actually, if you look at the numbers, since they introduced quote unquote women for tri, the numbers have decreased. The numbers have decreased. They are not growing the sport with females. They are actually not doing anything. What they're trying to do is offer opportunities, right? Which is all marketing. Every business does marketing, to make things look like they are, just to gain more on the bottom dollar. And that's all they've done, right? With the quote unquote women for tri. It's not. It's slots we want women to pay for, is what they should call it. So they're not growing the sport with women. They are doing nothing. Literally, they're doing nothing, right? So if you want women, right, to participate more in triathlon, here's what they're doing. We will offer you spots to train for the longest distance that takes the most amount of hours to train for. Where I would argue, and I'm sure statistically, and most women agree, are the majority of the household and caregivers for the children or the house in general, or work and do both, or they're single moms. I know you're already time crunched. I know you got a lot going on. I know you're probably already maybe financially strapped. But here's what we're going to do. We are going to grow the sport of triathlon by giving you slots to do the longest race, the hardest race, the most time-consuming race. And guess what? It's also going to cost you the most money. But this is how we're going to grow the sport. It's the worst thing you can possibly do, but that's their thing, right? A women's only day. Again, numbers are down. They can't give these spots away. They can't give it because it's not genuine. There's a lot of different things, but the slot allocation process has become a joke. It just really has. In a lot of ways, hopefully one day they go back to the way it should be. I got land blasted when they split up the world championship days. I think Nice will be a lot more fun to watch than people think. But in terms of, I think I have 3 hate emails from my podcast about the changing up of like the world championships. And it's like, world championships, go back to where it was 2,000 people, split down the middle, male and female, the best of the best. It's becoming, I think that's why it's obvious. People aren't claiming spots, so it's not working. You can offer more, doesn't mean more are going to be taken. I just think they've gone about it the wrong way, and hopefully they'll resolve that and start rotating around the world, right? And just leave Hawaii and go back every once or 3 years and go to different locations, but keep it small, right? If you want to highlight women, highlight them the day before, or highlight the men the day before, have the women have a different day. Doesn't matter. Everyone can be highlighted, but the fact is you can have women have their only day in race, but if no women are watching because the women don't care and they're not trying to grow the sport, then you're only marketing to the athletes already in it. And again, you're marketing a full, right? Which is it's a messaging problem that the Ironman brand and triathlon in general has dug ourselves into. Is when people hear the word triathlon, they think Ironman, and they think, I don't have the time for that. I don't want to do that. That seems impossible, right? So you alienate a huge part of the population where people don't hear triathlon and think 200-yard sprint, 5-mile bike, 5K run. Oh, I can do that for sure. right? So it's a branding and a messaging problem. And by trying to quote unquote get more females into it, they're just trying to, get more people to sign up and offering, more expensive slots to, more exotic places to spend money. I mean, it really is kind of crazy.
Yeah. I really feel like I don't know enough about slot allocation to even comment on it, to be honest. But all I can say is from my own personal perspective is that I agree with you on that KONA stuff. I just wish it would be, kind of how it was. I mean, it make it tough. I mean, because I've always just felt like, if I ever was going to go to KONA, that I wanted to win my age group or get second or whatever, like really kind of get it. That's just me. And that's all I have to say about that.
No, I'll say one more thing.
Okay.
I mean, I'm going on vacation, so I'll just ignore the hate mail. Is that I remember years and years ago when the World Championship was the World Championship. Same thing for 70.3 distance. If you saw someone with a World Championship backpack or a World Championship swim cap or a World Championship or KONA sweatshirt or finisher, you were like that person is unreal. And it was you weren't starstruck, but you were like, man, that's incredible. Like that you qualified, you got that fast, you also got lucky, right? And you were determined, you did all those things. It was kind of like a badge of honor. And now when I show up to races, half the field's got one, right? Half the field's got a 70.3 World Championship swim cap or backpack or hat. And it's like everybody's got one. And so I also think that while I think we've gone away from it goes back to a brand and a messaging problem. Is not, yes, all things are possible, right? But they shouldn't be that, easy, frankly. So now it's like, again, like I see an Ironman World Championship from St. George or Kona, or you'll see them from Nice. And like they were sending emails out for people who qualified at races who were in races last year to see if they wanted to go to a world championship in Europe.
Right.
That's you've watered down and you've really taken away the top of the pedestal and what it means to get there. It's just true, and if you got to roll down, you're in, that's great. You're taking full advantage and you have every right to go. But what I'm saying is that, it'd be like you showed up to your local marathon where it was 700 people and 500 people had a Boston Marathon qualifying shirt on.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to think two things. One, I don't belong here because I can't go, or that's not that hard. So you're doing one, either making it seem way too exclusive to where, I don't feel welcome here because there's no way I can compete with these people, even though you might be faster than 3/4 of them because, they changed the qualifying times over to make more people happy and to make more money. Or you're going to think, oh, I thought Boston was like this, like really, really hard, lifelong bucket list dream, but it looks like everybody can do it. So maybe I'll shift. And it just hurts the sport, I think. And, again, like I know athletes that in this last like 2 or 3 years have like their lifelong dream that we've worked together has been to qualify for the World Championships.
Mm-hmm.
And now they've seemed somewhat disinterested. They're like, I really wanted that, like that extra bit of the challenge, that extra bit to get there and to make it and to have that. And now there's like, now I'm not really interested because it's become so easy. So again, it's all about messaging and branding and how you communicate with the public and with your athletes and with your customer base. Hey, this is all, I get it. Everything is possible, but it shouldn't be easy, right? To make it. It's like, cheating your kids out of working hard, at their sports that they do when they're kids, and they don't make the cut for a team and you beg the coach to put them on, the first team just because you want them. You don't want them to go through that disappointment. Disappointment is good. Like failure and disappointment is healthy. And we've just become totally allergic to that by either choosing not to do something because we're favorite or shielding people from the feeling of disappointment and failure because we, as a society, frankly, just don't know how to deal with it anymore because we have gotten so soft and shield from these like hard experiences. Like life is hard. Life is really, really, really challenging. Like I was having a conversation with these a soccer club yesterday, and he said, he works with like 800-900 kids, and he said I had a dad come in and he asked me, his 10-year-old who's really, really good didn't make the A team, but he made the B team. He's only 10. He's got his upside's huge, but if I put him on the A team, he'd ride the bench. He'd ride the bench. And so I put him on the B team, and the dad called me and was chewing into me, and he said his kid was devastated and so disappointed, and he said, all right, well, let's go through two scenarios. Scenario one, right, is your kid gets to be on a team he doesn't deserve to be on, so he doesn't work as hard because he thinks he's already there, and then he rides the bench and doesn't learn anything. That's scenario one, right, the one you're asking. Or scenario B is he doesn't make the A team. He gets to play a lot. He gets better. He wants to challenge himself more because he hasn't reached the A team, becomes a better soccer player, and continues to love the sport. Which one? And the guy hung up on him.
Jesus, man.
And he was like, so I guess you picked option one. But again, like that's just an example, a real world example of the same thing that we've gotten, with all sports, right? It's not just triathlon, it's all sports. It's, these standards should be high, right? And because we love challenges. And again, that's why I think you see a lot of athletes gravitate toward a different sport because they want an extra challenge. And some things, like a lot of us want things in our life and want these elusive, unattainable challenges that we aren't really sure we can get to, but that we like having out there because it drives us. And when you make something more really, really attainable, right, then it removes that spirit from a lot of people and a lot of participants that I think undervalues and underappreciates the people that want to go bigger and go harder currently, but then also the people who did it 3 or 4 years ago. So again, I think it's a messaging problem that I think we're frankly all responsible for.
Okay. So when you said that about you have athletes that have really had that dream about going to KONA or whatever, and then all of a sudden kind of started being a little disinterested,
Mm-hmm.
I totally resonate with that because I mean, everything you're just saying, it's like, it seems like I don't know, 2 week or whatever, 3 weeks ago, I went and did that sprint, for example, and I thought I raced okay, and I got back. You know how you look at the board and they're posting results and shit, and I'm like thinking, well, I probably snuck in top 5 or whatever. I was 9th, and I was thinking to myself, whoa. The first thing, it'd be easy to be disappointed in that, but man, that lit a fire with me like I just can't even explain. It was like, okay, you got to get back to work, man. It's not just going to be handed to you. I'm racing in the 60-year-old age group now, and these dudes are toasting me in Central Illinois. And I thought I raced pretty well. So I do like that challenge. I think that there's something to be said for that. It's like creating something like Burning Man, right? And then going to it 20 years later when like everybody and their brother goes to it. There's something to be said about kind of being part of a, like you said, man, it's sort of a badge of honor, man, instead of just like everybody rolling into KONA now or whatever. And I don't even know. I don't follow that shit that much. But for some reason, I got kind of a sour feeling about it a few years ago, and my desire kind of waned. So I totally get that.
I mean, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, because this is truly how I feel. It is that up until 3 years ago, it was with the qualifying for the World Championships was exclusive to athletes that had worked hard enough, trained hard enough, gotten fast enough, gotten lucky enough, and did well, and then could pretty much afford it. Yeah. Post-COVID, when they changed everything, now it's become basically exclusive to athletes who are probably sometimes fast enough, but mostly to those that can afford it. So it's still exclusive, but it's more about the exclusivity of what you can afford. And that's just not how it should roll. Next up, Adam Vela. How do I approach a hill on a run? Slow going up or fast going down? Excellent question. So the approach for cycling and running are both very different. So cycling, you want to actually work pretty decently going up the hill and then not work as hard going down, because your return on investment is much greater going up than it is going down, right? You can try to smash out 350 watts going downhill as you're running out of gears to go like 0.2, not even 0.2, like 0.1 miles an hour faster, because you've already hit critical speed, with physics that you can't go any faster, but you're just trying to hammer it out. So you're still creating, right, the effect of building lactic acid and trying extra versus going uphill. You could go 250 versus 200 and gain, like 0.4 miles an hour. Right. Because also the uphill is going to take you, like if you got an equal uphill and equal downhill, the uphill is going to take you, minute, 200, 300% longer, because you're going uphill, you're going slower, versus downhill. Like a mile uphill, it might take you 4 minutes, right? Depending on the grade. And then the downhill is going to take you what? Minute and 10, right? So you have more time to make speed. Running is the opposite. So running uphill, you don't want to increase your heart rate and really hammer out the hill. You don't want to keep your heart rate under control. And then on the downhill, you want to elongate that stride and really, really flow with that and go. Use that free speed, use gravity, and go. And that's just it. And that's a skill, right? But you have to just kind of like let it fly, right? One of the best races to watch that is like the St. George 70.3 or full, where it's a rolling kind of like hard courses. The athletes that like fly down those rollers, like they've trained themselves to do that, because you can create the best speed. It's not easier, right, from a heart rate standpoint, but it's better speed, right, with less effort, but you still take the pounding. But you get a much better return on investment from running hard on the downhills, with running, and then you get a better return on investment from cycling hard in the uphills, right? Not hard, like not overdoing it, but pushing it versus hammering it on the downhills.
Yeah, you got to be strong going up. I think it's a matter of athletes, different types of athletes, different types of courses. All hills aren't created equally, and if you're doing a full, in like a Wisconsin full, I always think about this. It's like I do work on the hills, but you got to be careful of overworking, because there's so damn many of them. And but I agree with you. I think you want to ride up it strong and ride over it strong, and then you just get so much on the backside that you can recover. And the same kind of goes for running too. I think you're right. I mean, it's just you just got to kind of I always think about going up hills running wise is more lifting than pushing. So it's kind of a shorter stride and a choppier stride, and I just kind of have learned, and I've run a lot of hills, so I feel comfortable with that, running up them, depending how long they are too, It's like sometimes you got to get after it a little bit and get over it, and but the downhill part is where people, I do think, struggle, because you got to figure out, it's like mountain biking for me is like, once you're going down a hill, you just got to go down. You can't try and control too much. Just let your body catch you and pick it up quick and not overpound.
The last thing you want to do is actually be on your brakes, which is what most athletes do.
Right.
Most athletes on the downhill are like all on their brakes, like they're squeezing the death out of them because they think it's safer, but it's actually, you have less control over your bike. Just like you have more control over bike when you're pedaling versus coasting.
All right.
This one's from Lessa. Question: building/plugging into your local tri community, has participation declined or changed in the past few years, or are there just so many opportunities? Personally, coming from St. Louis, curious how others around the country feel as well. I don't know that participation has declined. I think people are racing less because they got in a habit of that. I think you're seeing kind of a resurgence in that, and you'll see even more of a resurgence next year. When it comes in like the local tri community, there are a lot of great tri clubs out there, but local tri clubs tend to have kind of a very territorial name and kind of like vibe about them that they're, they can, again, going back to like exclusive versus inclusive, is like you really want one really, really, really great one, versus having like four, fragmented ones that, where you're not helping each other. Because if the goal is to help the sport, then you help the sport, and it's not about that. But, that's one of the great things about, not being, plugged into or tied to a local tri community is, if you're on a team like, or an ambassador, you're on a team like, and we have a team where we've got, we're a huge tri club. We're around the country. You still get to hang out and see and communicate with like-minded individuals, but you're not, condensed. It's kind of like, what most clubs do now, what most teams are now is like us. Like we're a worldwide team. We're a nationwide club where athletes come in from all over and hang out and do things. And that's kind of what it always is. Most local tri clubs is kind of like the person who grows up in the town of 150 and stays and marries their, high school sweetheart and then never leaves. Nothing wrong with that. But the pool's pretty small, right? It's like, 8 guys to choose from, and you just happen to fall in love with like one of the 8, versus like knowing and having other experiences outside of your town and meeting somebody, things could be a little different. So yeah, I mean, I don't think participation declined. I think people are also very, very busy, and finding people to run really, really good triathlon clubs and like actually do it the right way. People like the thought of it, just like they like the thought of coaching. But when it comes down to like actually making things happen, it's very complicated and very difficult, especially when a lot of people are just so fragmented and wanting to include people and do things. And yeah, I think it's unfortunately part of the sport when it comes to, people who want that kind of recognition. But, if you want to grow a sport, you do what you can to grow a sport.
Yeah. Look, I did that when I was getting started like in Nashville and trying to find that tri club situation. And it really boils down to kind of meeting somebody that you click with, or a few people, cause it's like, I feel like those, like a tri club, a lot of times there's so many different types of personalities, and it is kind of based on just who shows up because you are in the same geographic area. And what I notice is like, I feel like sometimes if there's a couple of tri clubs or 3 in the same city, it kind of gets that little Hatfield-McCoy vibe going. It's like, don't go over there, and then you kind of get a twinkle in your eye, and you see somebody over there that you like, but you can't cross enemy lines, and then you work out with them or whatever. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's sort of the sense.
I'm sure fraternities and sororities are great.
Yeah, same type of deal.
I'm sure they are, but that was never me. Right, because like that's your friend pool for the rest of college and probably the rest of your life. Not the rest of your life, but you know what I mean. Like you're very, very, very specific of these random people who chose to go through Rush the same times you did. Now they're the people, because you're not going to hang out with other ones, right? You're just going to hang out with them. So it's all about seeing as many people and hang out with as many people.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. We got one more in us.
Well, I know.
Short, quick one, because Michael Tate did actually an excellent. I've already answered it. Jeff, how about, is there an advantage to riding in the big ring versus the small ring, given that resistance feels the same? For example, if I'm in my easiest gear in the big ring, or in the middle gear, or in my small ring, but the resistance feels the same, is it better to be in one ring versus the other, or are they one and the same? This would be for riding at pills. Yeah, a lot of feedback on that, and yeah, Michael Tate answered it. If you want the straightest chain line possible, big to big is terrible, right? Just like small to small. The trade-off is you want the straightest line for your chain, right? Because the shortest distance is the fastest and easiest. So you can actually, right, have both. If you're going up like a roller and you're in your big ring, you want to shift it because you're grinding. You want to find the easiest one to pedal smooth, right? Because if you don't, you're going to be 1, grinding, or 2, spinning out. Like if you're in like small to small, you're going to be spinning out really, 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 really hard and a lot to basically barely keep speed. On the other end, if you're in your big chain ring, down at the very, very end, you're going to also be grinding it out, right? Just way too much torque. So there's always a happy medium there. But yeah, I would not also overanalyze where you are. If it feels right, like watts are watts. Watts and cadence and effort, they're the same. So look through that. But yeah, that's it. We'll wrap it up. We'll do more questions next week. on our July 4th episode when we're working and you're barbecuing. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com, and there's our one-stop shop for all things coaching camps and community. Click on the online store and support us. It's a great way to buy gear and take the load off of Mike, who's in the middle of a move as we speak. And then you can also go to our coaches tab if you're interested in getting coaching help for the rest of the year or next year. Look us up, pick the coach that's right for you. And as always, Mike's available, crushingiron@gmail.com. If you need anything from me, c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, my man.
See you next time.
See ya.